It's 2023, and many have become accustomed to talking smack about Konami and its lack of modern games. But what if we told you the company has actually been keeping a steady tempo pumping out games for years?
TapTap.
It feels like it's been an eternity since Konami produced mainstream hits for eager gamers to devour. Gamers have been waiting nearly a decade for new entries in the Castlevania, Metal Gear Solid, and Silent Hill series. A Silent Hill revival is at least finally in the works, but in recent years, Konami has kept its most beloved franchise dead and buried, and then danced on those graves by creating patchy slot spin-offs instead of real games. It's beyond frustrating. Speaking of dancing, the late 90s and early 2000s saw the invasion of loud, colorful rhythm games in arcades. Do you remember smashing Poppin' Music's colorful buttons? Or being drenched in sweat while jamming to Boom Boom Dollar on a Dance Dance Revolution machine? These beloved titles hail from Konami's rhythm arcade brand known as the Bemani series. Despite Konami's current drought of releases, the granddaddy of the Bemani series, Beatmania, is still going strong. In fact, the 30th installation of Beatmania, 2DX, was released in late 2022, providing rare signs of life at Konami post Hideo Kojima. On December 10th, 1997, Konami rang in the holiday season by filling Japanese arcades with the sound of hip-hop and techno music through its newly launched rhythm game, Beatmania. As the first title in the series, it was delightfully experimental, but was lacking in some selection of songs. Music games were still a new genre, and developers were figuring out what gamers expected from them. Konami wasn't alone in experimenting the rhythm game genre. Sony famously burst onto the rhythm scene in December 1996 with the ever-believing rapping dog simulator, Parappa the Rapper. To impress a pretty sunflower girl, players had to input commands according to the prompt on the screen. Parappa also allowed for freestyling by straying from the strict call and response gameplay, creating hilarious raps with the voice samples provided in each song. But how many songs did this rapping pup learn to spit? Not many. Parappa was a success with only 6 unique tracks. Konami were confident they could outdo Sony. That's why the number of songs in the first Beatmania game reached an unprecedented level for the genre. Seven songs? That's it? These days, we're spoiled with abundant storage for songs and never-ending DLC packs to expand a game's library, but back then, those luxuries didn't exist. Despite Beatmania's playlist only containing 7 songs, it still managed to capture the hearts of arcade goers and inspired the expansion of the Bemani brand. For the 1997 standards, the arcade cabinet was pretty strange. Instead of an arcade stick and round buttons, Beatmania introduced a layout with 2 black keys on top, 3 white ones below, and a big plate on the side. Nobody had a clue how to play this game? Hey, but at least it came equipped with a coaster. It turns out the big plate wasn't there for drinks at all. It was for scratching records like a DJ. With this machine, Konami started a revolution and introduced a new arcade favorite. But with just 7 songs, it didn't take long to master the original Beatmania. Spend a few afternoons and a few more quarters and you'd soon be a pro. Fans were begging for more songs, but back then, there weren't online updates to inject new tunes. So what could Konami do about it? The initial game's playlist might have been stingy, but Konami had a clever solution. They not only managed to distribute a large selection of tracks, but also boosted the sales of the series by developing iterative editions of the game. It sounded reasonable, but it showed its limits in no time. When you count all the versions of Beatmania released across all platforms in the first 5 years of the series, there were dozens of titles, including specially made versions for the PlayStation and even the Game Boy. The initial success of Beatmania paved the way for what is now the only surviving branch of the series, Beatmania 2DX. Following in the footsteps of the original, Beatmania 2DX will become a holiday mainstay, with new versions expected around the end of the year every year. If you're not super familiar with 2DX, that's no surprise. This branch of Beatmania wasn't widely available in North America until recent years, but it has quite a history. In February 1999, while Japan was waiting for spring to arrive, nobody expected the sudden arrival of a cabinet that would enthrall countless rhythm game players. Its name was hold on. Actually, before we talk about 2DX, we need to turn back the clock 1 year. The arrival of 2DX doesn't make as much sense without first looking at another Bemani franchise. On September 28, 1998, while Japanese gamers were busy catching them all in Pokemon Yellow, a new machine showed up in Japanese arcades blasting catchy songs. It was called Poppin' Music. This arcade machine's large, candy-colored 9-button layout was divisive. Gamers in China were so frustrated and infatuated with Poppin' Music that they gave it a cute nickname inspired by its colorful buttons. They called it Smashing Pots. The first generation of Poppin' Music shared technical DNA with Beatmania due to it running on the same arcade hardware. However, the key differences lies in controls and presentation. The cartoonish characters and vibrant colors of Poppin' Music stood in stark contrast to the sleek black aesthetic of Beatmania. Poppin' Music's easy-to-grasp controls and playful vibe attracted younger and more casual gamers who weren't drawn in by Beatmania's intimidating wheels of steel. However, many players who tried out Poppin' Music had a common gripe. Why were there so many buttons? Even though Poppin' Music ditched the complicated turntable, it introduced fresh layers of frustration in its controller layout and absurd number of buttons. Kids and adults alike struggled when songs became more complex. The distance between each button was vast, making it impossible to keep your hands in a fixed position. Modern rhythm games like DJ Max or Easy 2-On can be played comfortably with the player's hands remaining in one position, but Poppin' Music's layout makes that unthinkable. The unwieldy controls stirred debates among players, and opinions on whether it's good or fun varied greatly. If there were Steam reviews at that time, they would decidedly have been mixed. By the time Poppin' Music was released, Beatmania was poppin' as well, birthing more iterative editions than a family of rabbits. In less than a year since its introduction and third installment, Beatmania Third Mix was invading arcades. Not only did it boast a staggering 16 songs, a 128% increase compared to the first title, but it also featured a collaboration with the rising star at the time, renowned film connoisseur, king of fandoms, and Konami's very own game director, Hideo Kojima. In a lesser-known example of cross-promotion, a remix of the main theme from the recently released Metal Gear Solid graced the Beatmania lineup as one of its new additions. With the growing popularity of Beatmania, player feedback naturally reached the development team. The developers of Konami pondered over a critical issue. Some players thought Beatmania's 5-key layout was too simple, but others criticized Poppin' Music's controller for having too many buttons. In other words, gamers were really hard to please. Surprise! Beatmania's design was already somewhat difficult to figure out, so doubling the number of inputs would be too radical of a change. Konami felt that it had two choices: continue with the 5-key and turntable layout, or compromise by switching to 7 keys, introducing an updated controller model. Konami decided change was the catalyst to bring more fans to Beatmania. Thus, in 1999, while Japan was waiting for spring, nobody expected the sudden arrival of a cabinet that would enthrall countless rhythm game players all over again. Its name was Beatmania 2DX. Time flies when you're having fun, and 2DX is now going strong in its 24th year. Though some players struggle with its 3-up, 4-down with a turntable controller layout, many keep trying to complete the Safari, a notoriously difficult song that's part of the game's 7th Dan difficulty. An evergreen tree in the world of rhythm games, Beatmania and 2DX have managed to maintain their unique charm. Across more than 2 decades, the 2DX series introduced many to beloved tracks like Evans, Second Heaven, and Red Zone. In October 2022, 2DX also welcomed its 30th installment, Resident Evil. Coincidence? Perhaps this latest edition is meant to kickstart a renaissance like Capcom has with its survival horror juggernaut. Compared to previous iterations, 2DX30 has had massive changes to the music library and overall theme. Resident marks the return of the nightclub DJ Fantasy, as reflected in the slogan, which roughly translates to the 30th performance. The Resident DJ never stops evolving. It perfectly echoes Beatmania's original theme, striving to be even more DJ-like than DJ Max. And as with most of the recent iterations of the series, Beatmania 2DX30 has had a model released in America. If you can still find an arcade in America to play it at. I swear, they're somewhere out there. But time never stops moving forward, and it seems like Beatmania never stops with it. We're working on this video in October 2023, and the 31st edition of Beatmania 2DX launched in Japan literally a week ago. It's hard to look at the relentless rhythm of Beatmania and not think about the unstoppable beat of time itself. Growing older can be scary for some, but Beatmania reminds us that games, like ourselves, can age like fine wine. In the nearly 3 decades that Beatmania has been around, music games have undergone tremendous change. Heck, music itself has undergone tremendous change. In 1999, streaming music services weren't a thing. We were still burning CDs and downloading MP3s to share our favorite tunes. How we consume and engage with music now is almost unimaginably different compared to when Beatmania was first introduced. And yet, no matter how many things change, one thing can be relied upon: the never-ending appeal of music and the unfaltering passion for music that we all have, as evident in rhythm games. The resident DJ never stops evolving, neither will music, and neither